This is Van Electric Ghost, and we're live on the air with Dr. Rochelle Vogt for the first time. I want to welcome you to the Van Electric Ghost podcast. How you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thanks. Thanks for having me. Happy to be here.
We love to talk to people live from around the world, and we're live on LinkedIn, YouTube, and Kick at the moment. And before we get to the heart of your story, we always ask every guest a couple questions. What motivates you, and why do you do what you do?
I think what motivates me is knowing that there is something greater than us as individuals that we're all kind of connected to.
Hmm.
And I think everyone comes to that in their own way. Some people, it's more spiritual. Some people, it's more religious. Some people, it's just more of a philosophy of life. But I feel like that connection is what underlies really what humanity is and what being human is. And I just feel like there's something about this time and this era where that's really important for people to reconnect with because we're so distracted often in this digital era. So, that's really when it comes down to it, what I feel life is about. And so that's what fuels me and what inspires me. And when I see people, and certainly when I can be of service to others who are on their path to finding that connection, it's really powerful because that's when we get to the heart of who we are and what we're here to do and what makes us tick and how you find our passions and all of those wonderful explorations that make being human so wonderful.
Yeah, that's why I love talking to creators, because I wear three hats. I'm a musician, I'm a podcaster, I'm a software guy. So I
Yeah.
have like three different hats: left brain, right brain, kind
Mhm.
of like Renaissance type of idea. Is that you can
Mhm.
kind of do both, or you can do it all. But in this age, like creative people tend to want to get people to feel the vibe, right?
Mm.
To actually connect to that, what we call music, we call like this universal key. Right?
Mhm.
So when you hit a universal key and you're doing a show, everybody's waving their hands, everybody's like in sync. If you're a punk rocker, everybody's in a mosh pit. It's like
Right.
you able to kind of hit that frequency that
Yeah.
aligns yourself, and it's like basically it's like a law of attraction. You bring your tribe to you.
Yeah.
And I think that can happen all kinds of ways. I was a sociology major, so I kind of studied that
Nice.
that idea. And
Yeah.
being a musician is like it's good to understand like crowd behavior.
Sure.
But yeah, I think it's interesting when people are so disconnected, even
Mm.
though we're connected.
Yeah.
Like, this is the age of like I can talk to somebody like Australia or New Zealand or like Taiwan through this
Right.
method. But then, am I only talking to people that the algorithm told me I should talk to? Am I
Right.
not challenging myself to go outside my narrow lane, even though it's, oh, we're so connected? But are you really, if all you see is what's geared to your mindset?
Yeah. That's so true, and it reminds me of what, before we had technology and we were so connected in this way, people would had the expression that they were in a room full of people, but they felt alone.
Hmm.
And it's kind of an echo of that, right? And it really, whether it was, years ago before the digital era or now, the same thing can hold true. If we're disconnected from who we truly are, then we're not connecting with those around us, whether they're in person or virtual.
Yeah, the idea of being present,
Mhm.
for you, when I always bring these ideas from analogies from music. Like, if you're a musician and you're like a fusion jazz artist, you're not as tied to the sheet music as a classical
Mm,
musician. So you're willing to be in the moment, and if somebody does a change, it's not expected. It's not the end of the world.
right.
You
Go with
actually
it.
can go with it. You can kind of be like that comedian on
Mhm.
stage and say, "Oh, this joke doesn't work. I'll go to the next one."
Yeah.
Versus the person that has to stay on plan. And if there's a happy accident, it's like, well, even if it's better than the plan, can't touch it because it's not in the plan.
Right.
So, like this idea, like if you can be present and
Mm,
and have like listening skills, because the listening skills are like microcosm, macrocosm. Like you
mhm.
have your inner voice, like your own like self, and then you have what's going on outside of you. And what filter are you using to like limit what you've heard? Like as soon as you hear a
Mhm.
key word, do you jump to a conclusion, which we tend to do,
Mhm.
and then we don't actually hear what the person said, and maybe we need to say, "Is that what you really meant?" Or we
Right.
just assume that's what they meant.
Yeah, absolutely, and especially when it comes to performance too, we can have those filters And, behind those filters are memories and fears. Like, if something happens that's not on the plan, I won't be able to control it. And then, therefore, it will be bad or I will be judged. And so, that really comes down to our nervous system kind of being the filter for our reality, which is why it's so important that we have the tools to, as you say, be able to be present, but also to clear the space and have that expansive capacity to be present in a way that there's flow and not so much control or fear.
Yeah, it's like the teleprompter doing the TED Talk versus the person, like, doesn't have to have a teleprompter
Right.
because 'cause they've done it 10,000 times and it's muscle memory,
Mhm.
and they can read the room, and they know what's gonna work and what's not gonna work, and they're not whole hung up on being perfect, the perfection
Right.
trap.
Yeah.
Because I find in this digital age, because we have all these controls, all this capability, it's like, are people scared of the happy accident? They're scared of the flow state. They wanna
Mhm.
make every little thing to the nth degree, and in art is all about imperfection,
Yeah, that's true.
and and when you try to use too many digital tools, it becomes too perfect, and then it lacks heart, life, soul.
That's right. That's right.
Um,
And we're going into an era where people are developing that discernment because we've got so much AI content and
wow.
we're getting we're gonna get that we're building it already. And a lot of it's, a lot of that skill is there, but it has to have the heart and the truth and the authenticity to be really human. And people are getting more and more discerning in that way.
Yeah, because when you see the AI slop, you know it, right?
Hmm.
And the idea of like you have this like I guess a patented or like a trademarked map method, and then you have the middle life alchemy method. And
I'm
I don't know if you want to
certified.
kind of talk about those methods.
Sure. Yeah, I'm actually certified in the MAP method. It's this approach that was created by Colette Stryker, and it's founded on a body of work called Process Healing, that was developed by a psychologist from Canada, Dr. Gary Flint. And it's a really beautiful body of work. He was actually an experimental psychologist. And one of the best things that I heard him write about in his book was that because he didn't have, we talked about filters and kind of can think about that, the boxes that we put things in life. He didn't have clinical psychology as his foundation, so he wasn't given a bunch of boxes that everyone's supposed to fit in. He
Mm,
was an experimental psychologist, so he was really listening, watching, observing, and had didn't have those filters that were clogged with
like
all
an
of the.
outsider coming in.
Right, didn't have the diagnoses and the need to put everything in a perfect little box. And so, as that, kind of open channel and coming at it as a true, from that experimental psychologist perspective, he really was able to break into some really revolutionary ground, and he worked with people with really complex, traumas, and he discovered what we would call, an ally within the subconscious mind. So, a part of the subconscious mind that was above all of the trauma and the issues. So, if you think of it, I like to think of it as like, outside we'll see the weather and we might see rain or sleet or snow. But if you were to get in an airplane and fly above the cloud bank, you would see the sun and the blue
Mhm.
sky. And so the superconscious, which is this ally that he found in his work, and we call it the superconscious in the MAP method work. The superconscious is above all of those traumatic issues that are a part of who we are, all the different parts of ourself. And we can access that superconscious level and almost like recode, if you will, or
Oh,
use a
remap.
coding
You remap
language
all your
or
stuff.
remap.
Yeah.
Exactly. And so by accessing that ally, we can go through and we're leveraging what's called in the neuroscientific field, the window of reconsolidation. And it's
Mhm.
where the neural connections are they're set because we had a particular memory or experience. And when we access them, and the great thing about the MAP method is we don't have to relive a trauma to address it and to clear the emotional intensity. We can just reference it. That time in my life, the period of these years, or that time I lived somewhere, or something kind of on the vaguer side so that people don't feel like they have to relive it in detail or describe it. But the subconscious mind knows exactly what we're talking about. It's a quantum computer. It has, recorded all of the details. It knows the smells that were in the air. It knows, what you ate that day. It has all the details, but we can reference it. It pulls it into what we call the active experience. And then the superconscious commands help us get at the shift. And we're literally reprogramming or doing a neural reprogramming in real time as we're using those superconscious commands. So what people experience is suddenly over a few moments and certainly over the course of an hour, an experience that they had or multiple experiences that were pretty intense in their recollection, suddenly it's gone. It shifts. And not only does it shift the emotional intensity, but sometimes their entire perspective about what happened and how it played out just shifts completely. I was working with someone the other day and they had a situation, there was an altercation, and they felt like, as they recalled it, individuals that were involved in the periphery were kind of egging them on. And
Mhm.
then suddenly, as we were shifting it, they were literally doing the opposite. They were people were trying to find peace in the situation and help them resolve it without. So it even changed the perspective of what was happening in the periphery. So as we shift these things and remove that emotional intensity, the whole perspective, going back to that analogy of the filters, they suddenly shift and change, and there's more of an expansive capacity to look at things in the context more broadly instead of a more closed box of a traumatic experience, and now the world has to be a certain way because I have these memories. And so it's pretty powerful when we can make those shifts, and it's like pulling on a string, it's
Yeah.
connected to everything.
That's
And
that's that's the thing you find out, like, I went to Bowdoin and, it's Socratic method and
Mhm.
critical thinking, and the idea is that, like, you don't know what you don't know, right? But
Yeah.
you are willing to question things. They have that critical thinking and not just make assumptions, right? To actually
Yes.
have debates and not get angry about the other person's opinion, but actually wanna peel the onion and, like, find out, like, what
Absolutely.
what is going on, and I think if you get too far into STEM and you don't do the softer things,
Mhm.
like social sciences,
Yeah.
sociology, psychology, philosophy, history. If you don't think that words matter, you don't think
Mhm.
that you just think like, oh, it's A and B, and you don't think about the grays in between. I think we get people today that seem to be so into like polar opposites.
Yeah.
Yes, no, 0, 1.
Right.
It's all binary, It's like
Yeah, there's
no,
no capacity for nuance and for understanding the deeper. Yeah, it's never black and white, and I absolutely agree. I was in speech and debate in high school, and it was very, uh, it was a very transformative experience, to kind of at that period of my life in particular, because it really shaped how I look at the world and how I look at everything that happens, because there's always multiple sides. There's
yeah,
never just one story.
yeah,
And
and it
unfortunately, we have a headline oriented world where people read a headline and think that they're informed.
well, yeah, I mean, the thing is, like, our tech bro friends have created systems that actually, create, um, like a profit from discordance.
Mhm.
So they actually put you into camps,
Yeah.
and it's very profitable for them to do that.
Mhm.
So you have to buck that with your critical thinking and say, "Is that true?"
Yeah.
Like, is there another way of thinking? And it is this idea of expansion because as an artist, if you cross into multiple genres, then you create something new because you pull from multiple places. If you're
Mhm.
like a blues guy, so I'm just a pure blues guy, and all I'm gonna do is Delta blues.
Mhm.
But then you get a guy like Hendrix who's like, well, I'll mix psychedelia with Cherokee mysticism, with
Mhm.
Dylan lyrics, and you get like something that never existed because you're willing to open up and be very expansive.
Yeah.
Today we have people maybe are not as experimental. They are
Mhm.
so in their camp, they like always stay in their camps. And I just find it's like you're
Yeah.
missing so much if you're not willing to go beyond these like boundaries. It's really when you go.
Yeah.
people who are like maybe neurodivergent or more willing to do that.
Yeah, but
Then,
they're also pressured, as you know, with sociology interest, they're pressured to find their identity by joining those tribes.
yeah,
So, the whole system is really rigged against you, and against that more human, natural human tendency, which would be to be inquisitive and to ask questions. And instead, you're really set up to pick a side.
yeah, even in the idea, like, your educational system, even though it's supposed to be pushing you to go into the Socratic method and do the critical thinking, it still tends to align you to be able to work on that production line, whether it's a white collar production line
Mhm.
or a blue collar production line.
Yeah,
And it's the person who becomes like the entrepreneur, there's the person that kind of bucks that and says, "Well, I'm not going to fit in that cubicle box because
yeah.
that doesn't work for me." And that's a hard thing to do because, like, there's this idea of safety. Like,
Mhm.
everybody's running from a virtual wolf. We had real wolves, and now we have virtual wolves.
Yeah.
So the safety is safety and staying in the job with the toxic boss. Safety
Mm.
and staying within the relationship with the toxic spouse. Because you don't it's more scary to think about what could happen if I leave,
Right.
and the pain I'm actually going through is acceptable.
Yeah, it's very true. People are a little further away from their authentic choices, especially when they're faced with fear, or fear is controlling their inability to make a move for sure.
So the idea, like, you help women shift from like the survival mode to like the thing I've been talking about, the creative space
Mhm.
where it's like boundless. Like you
Yeah.
could get, if you go into the creative space, it's like, is this what you can't think of today, but maybe you'll think of tomorrow?
Yeah, absolutely, and I think this really probably applies to everyone. And certainly I work with both men and women and people of all ages, but my work specifically with midlife women has been kind of focused around how that midlife period is, there's so much changing, and women at that age sometimes are kind of in between, nurturing children, whether those are younger children or teens, and then often aging parents on the other side. And
Mm,
so there's a lot of demands on their ability to nurture both directions, and then also still care for themselves. And during that period of time, women going through perimenopause and menopause, there's just a lot of biological changes that are, really playing with our capacity to manage stress. There's a lot of
mm,
impacts biochemically and hormonally, and things affecting our cortisol. So, sleep can be really challenging. Recovery from intense workouts can be challenging, and just recovery from stress. So, things that we were much more adaptable to, even just a few years prior suddenly become really challenging. So there's this period where that's happening that, either becomes a really big problem if we view it that way, and it can be a cascade of challenges, physically, relationally, psychologically, spiritually, all of those things kind of are up when your stress capacity is lower.
mm.
Or it can be an opportunity and an invitation to make some big changes in, how we place boundaries and how we show up, not just to nurture others, but to make sure that our cup is filled first, so that we aren't depleted in how we show up for others. So I think that is really how we shift out of the survival part, because the survival part's just kind of life, right? Life's coming at us. We're constantly responding. As I mentioned, any of those symptoms could be happening. Things could be happening in our life relationally. And if we're in the survivor aspect and perspective, we're kind of on our back feet and we're just responding. And it can feel like a fire hose of stuff
Treading,
coming at us.
treading water.
Yeah, and it's exhausting, and so, but if we shift the perspective to, I'm not broken. These are, and there's not, the other thing that's important to know is the perimenopause and menopausal stages they're not a disease process. It's a totally normal, natural part of life, but we do live in a particularly demanding and stressful period, in terms of what's happening in daily life now, that maybe wasn't as intense as it was, in years past, or in generations past rather. So, we have to be aware of, how much our digital digital life might be impacting our stress level, because it literally can affect our, going back to the conversation about choosing sides and the divisiveness, just taking that in on social media could be a real drain. It can be a real
Yeah.
stressor. So, you know, being able to place boundaries and maybe even choose to not to participate in certain aspects of social media that are draining could be a really empowering first step. And then that also limiting technology in a way that's healthful and
Yeah. Read a
healthy.
book.
Yeah,
Like,
exactly. Getting into, books and music and things that are more peaceful to the nervous system, especially as we get toward bedtime, and then limiting the blue light that's emitting from our devices, our phones, our iPads, our laptops and screens. That blue light is affecting our quality of sleep.
Mhm.
So, finding a way to get the devices out of our nighttime routines and maybe even using the blue light blocking glasses to a certain extent. So, there's so many ways that we have pulled our life away from nature,
Yeah.
and
Yeah. Yeah.
those things really impact our circadian rhythm. And so that's a huge piece of what's happening in the menopause and perimenopause time is just a lot of changes. And the more pulled from nature we are, the harder sometimes that road can be.
I know, like Hawthorne or Longfellow say, the nature is the cathedral.
Yeah,
And I was I'm big into Victorian poets, like
nice.
so like Blake and Wordsworth and Tennyson,
Keats.
Keats,
Hmm.
all of them. But the idea is like they would kind of yearn for the pastoral
Yeah,
restoration. Like you put your feet on
absolutely.
soil, you walk in the pines, like that.
Mm-hmm.
You go by a river. The sound of the river is actually restorative. It's
Yeah,
very powerful. And
it
I
is.
really believe that, the tech age has gotten people so into this antiseptic relationship with the planet, with Gaia.
Yeah.
I'm
Mhm.
part Cherokee, so there's a lot of mysticism in the
Nice.
Cherokee ancestors we
Mhm.
have, and we think about, like, every living thing has a soul, but some
Yeah,
people don't believe that, but the idea, like, everything, like the plants, everything,
yeah.
the wind, everything, and it's a different mindset. I was lived in Japan. There's a Shintoism is
Mm.
the same, somewhat similar to some indigenous peoples. Have these
Yeah.
ideas about like the spirits and connection between
Mhm.
beings and different states. But some folks, they get so caught up in the kind of Western idea,
Mhm.
which is
And
more like
reductionism.
Calvinistic,
Mhm.
and like okay, if I have wealth, that makes me a more moral person.
Mm.
Right, and so everything I do, even if it has damage, if I'm a trillionaire, that damage is okay because I'm actually closer,
Mm.
right? And that's where it seemed there's like there's this kind of mindset, it's like all encompassing, it's very stressful
Mhm.
because if you're seeing all this noise, like you said, and you have to learn. As a musician, I turn it off. Like if I'm gonna go
Yeah.
play my keyboard or my piano, I turn off my Apple Watch, I turn off my phone. I don't have anything on. I just
Yeah.
dive into in playing an instrument, like bass, guitar. You have to find a way to disconnect from this stuff
Mhm.
and connect to other things. Like maybe instead of texting somebody, maybe you call them on the phone. Maybe
Right?
if you actually do a phone call,
Hear their voice. Yeah,
right?
exactly.
Like or you actually walk over to their house and go have coffee.
Mhm.
People have like forgotten. Like, back in the '70s, I'm a child of the '70s, like, go over to my neighbor's house.
Yeah.
Go across the fence and start talking to your neighbor. Like, is that a big idea? Like, well, yeah, maybe you should do that.
Very true. Very true.
So, like, when you're able to clear, like, subconscious blocks or
Mhm.
nervous system, like, when you clear it, like, can you just describe, like, is that like a reset in computer where we do initializations and it,
Yeah,
like, reset
it's
all the cache?
it kind of is. It's, if you can think of it as those memories are charged And that when we're doing this work, we're really using those superconscious commands to help release the charge from those memories. And so we'll go through and we'll use different, what we call triggers, essentially. It could be events, it could be, beliefs or emotions, any of those different sort of frameworks to access those memories. And when those memories arise that are charged, then those commands are helping clear those particular neuronal connections, around an event, around an experience, around particular emotions. And so it could be like a relational issue, with a parent or with a loved one along the way that has a lot of charge and history. And as we, you know, get to some of the more foundational emotions that are stuck. Maybe it's anger with a particular person that needs to be cleared. And, we can't really just bypass and say, well, we're just going to forgive. It's like it's a really nice idea. But when
Good
we're
idea.
holding those memories and that charge, that's not authentic or real. It would just be words. And so we need to get to a way where that authentic aspect, and also, just to do an aside here and say that we include a lot of what people, we classically call parts work, and a lot of people know of it as internal family systems, but there were lots of
Mhm.
different parts work um, even before that became kind of more well known. So we're also integrating those parts and pieces um, over the lifetime into what we would call the main personality. Because, when we have anger, frustration issues, or stuck emotions or stuck patterns because of memories and experiences from our past, those are aspects of ourself that we can't abandon. We
Mhm.
have to embrace them and try to fully understand, even without talking it out or even cognitively fully understanding. We just have to come into an awareness that that part is displaying an intelligent adaptation. So some part of you was harmed or hurt or abandoned, and so the friction that exists today in relationships is due to that part wanting to protect. And so we don't want to override it. We don't want to abandon it. We want to embrace it and bring it into the fold and help it understand that that was then and this is now, and we're not going to let that happen again. That was when we were 5 or a younger age, and now we have different resources. And so as we pull those pieces in and dissolve the intensity around the emotions, then those parts can feel seen and heard and be a part of the current day main personality. And suddenly those intelligent adaptations that were showing up as resistance and friction, they just dissolve because they're no longer needed, which is a really powerful piece of our capacity to evolve as humans and shift.
Yeah, 'cause I think sometimes we grow up and people, around us, your parents, your grandparents, might say, "Well, you gotta push that down," right?
Yeah.
And then we hide we bury it, and then later it kinda exponentially, like, it gets in your face.
Mhm.
'Cause it
Yeah.
you get that crucible moment, and then suddenly, like, it just, like, it exponentially just explodes, in some people's case, like a road rage, or it becomes
Right.
a breakdown. The one thing I've always noticed, like artists, we kinda dive in.
Mhm.
We dive into our vulnerability, we look at the looking glass self, and we really challenge it, and we sometimes we go to the point where some artists, they're so into examining all those crucible moments, then maybe they are guilty of creating crucible moments to keep their livelihood going.
Mm. Yeah, yeah, it's true. I mean, if we linger in things, they become that much more present in how we're functioning. So yeah, there is the opposite. There's the going deeply into things and then just perpetuating.
Yeah,
But
because it
yeah, I
actually
think
pays the
you're
bills.
right, right, right. Yeah. But I think, there are a lot of artists who also keep that balance where they can get the intensity in their work, but there's
Like a
a
boundary.
theme of a resolution, at like
Yeah.
at the transformative part, right? So it was this, and that this is how it came out. And, and we can hear that. I think that again helps us honor that human journey aspect that we see reflected in art and music. Yeah.
So it's like taking that art, like, therapy,
Mhm.
because people like, oh, they journal or they draw or they do voice memos. They try to go dive or they talk to someone like yourself. Um, so what I find is like some folks like maybe they need that permission structure
Mhm.
because they came from a place where you don't talk about that. You don't do that because that makes you weak, or that makes you, that pain's too hard to deal with, so you just push it
Right.
down. So when you deal like when people come to you, like
Mhm.
what stage, I guess there are multiple stages, but maybe what's the common like example of somebody's that first comes to you, like they've got, I guess, some awareness that they need to talk to you.
Yeah, I think probably the biggest, um motivator is people realizing, especially if they've done work, if they've done the journaling, maybe they've done the talk therapy, they've done different modalities, but they're still discerning these patterns, whether it's in relationship or with their finances, or, there's something that keeps happening. I experienced this in my own life, those patterns that were like, I'd done the awareness, I'd done the trauma work, I'd done the therapy, like what's causing this to still happen in this particular predictable way. And that's when you realize that these are subconscious patterns. These are part of the automatic brain. And it's a different set of tools and a different approach. And it's not so much, and this is not in any way to make light of the journaling and of the be more emotive and talk oriented things. That's all great. But this is a process of getting at the patterns. And often some of these things are very pre-verbal, they're before we could make sense of it. So we are just really getting at repatterning connections in the brain that are around memories, stacked
Right.
memories that built into beliefs that are really early years that we were discerning from our environment for our own survival needs, based on, how a caregiver was reacting or responding. And so we can get at those things that are there again as an intelligent adaptation to help keep us safe and help shift them. So suddenly we're more resourced when it comes to the areas in life where we're seeing those patterns happen, and we're making different choices that we literally couldn't see before because we've made those shifts in the subconscious mind.
Thing is, your subconscious mind's like scenes from a play or a movie.
Yes, it
And
works in metaphor and images and
images, like, yeah.
right, which is why with the MAP method, even though we do talk a little bit, it's not like talk therapy. It's not a lot of talking about stuff. I mean, sometimes people will obviously they'll have these realizations and things are happening they want to share, and that's a part of it. But mostly, it's like this is what I want, and for some reason, I'm not able to get there. I get part way there, or I get all the way there, and then I come back and crash, and like the cycle keeps going. And we're like, okay, let's get at what's underneath that, and then we work that, and usually there are awarenesses and things shift and rather quickly, and that's a kind of a cool process, but it's definitely not, it doesn't have to be a lot of talking. It can be, it's it's interesting because I was just listening to this gentleman from Scotland who's an MD. He has something called Mickle therapy that he works with chronic pain patients. He's been doing it for like 25 years, and he was actually kind of, bringing in, the dialogue around, energy, and I think that, this is the time period where we're all gonna start to let go of in our judgments, and we have to start talking about consciousness and our energy body and the biofield as, much more complex and nuanced and involved in these things than
Yeah,
we
because some
thought
people
before.
might not, they think it's like foo-foo.
Yeah, they're not aware. It's like, well, the NIH actually founded the term biofield and, in the '90s. So it's like that's been around a long time. And if we look at, things like Ayurvedic practices, if we look at Chinese medicine, the
Yeah,
idea of these energy systems,
it's
is
kinda old.
ancient.
So, yeah,
Yeah,
'cause,
it's
a lot of indigenous cultures have that inherent
absolutely.
in
Yeah.
their structure. I mean, I lived in Japan, I went to Taiwan, and I know about, my Blackfoot heritage and my Cherokee heritage.
Mhm.
It's all about that.
It is. Yeah.
And it's like just because, like, modern science kind of poo-pooed it, and maybe we looked at surgical procedures,
Right. It's a
like
part of
like
the reductionist viewpoint,
yeah,
it it's
pharmaceuticals rather than
right.
looking at, in the Asian practices, from Tai Chi being very important,
Mhm.
breathing and meditation. I'm a Buddhist. I practice like
Nice.
Nichiren Daishonin Buddhism. It's all about like breath control and basically a lot of visualization and
Yeah.
and chanting and control of your mind state of like you know if you have your mind is so powerful that if you do a lot of visualizations and like that you believe you can make things happen.
Yeah,
They sound
our
simple, but
consciousness
it's there's a
yeah, our
lot of power.
consciousness is very powerful, and I think that, what is consciousness is something that we're gonna be kinda grappling with as humanity, but my guess is it's getting into that aspect of what is plasma, what is the biofield, and then how is consciousness housed? Because I don't think consciousness is just housed in the brain.
Mhm.
So, and then of course we have the beautiful body of work from heart math and our understanding of the powerful electromagnetic field around the heart, and the fact that we actually have more sensory neurites in the heart than we do in the brain. So, our real intelligence rests here in the heart, and so, that electromagnetic field and those waves are, in my view, probably a carrier for a lot of what we would call our human consciousness and how potentially we even store memory. Because we have those experiments they've done where they've moved, nearly all aspects of the brain that they thought contained memory, and the memories were still accessible through very interesting. You have
Yeah.
to read
The
Norman
the
Doidge's
human
book
the
uh,
hu
to get
human
more. To get
body
more.
is like, somewhat magical, so we don't
Yeah,
fully
there's a
understand it.
lot we don't understand.
And then a lot
Yeah.
of times with all these tech bros is like they're acting like that their CPUs are replicating our mind. And I'm
Yeah.
like, "Really? The
Yeah, they
human mind look how much energy you're taking, how much water you're taking to make that machine work. You look
right.
how many watts did it take for our brain to work? It's so inefficient. It's not that, you know, I don't think it's as impressive as they try to act like it is. Because
Yeah.
to me, it's like I'm a techie. I work in computers. I know
Mhm.
the limitations of the tech. It is wildly different than what people expect, machines to do, but
Mhm.
it's not like Data on Star Trek.
Yeah, yeah,
It's not that. It's not some cyborg
right.
that's living independently with a soul. You know,
Yeah.
we're not there yet.
No, and I think that that's true. We're in this very interesting time where a lot of things were built up around what we would call maybe the transhumanist movement. And, it's if you look closely, as you say, you cannot human consciousness is not just simply something you can download and upload. Now, would we get there someday? Maybe. I don't know. But I really think that we have not even begun to explore how amazing our biological technology is. And so much of it has maybe even been suppressed, if you will, because certainly from the Western perspective, we just in the reductionist model, there was no room for that conversation. So whether it was an active suppression or it was just passive because it doesn't fit the model, and there was a huge effort to remove uh, spirituality from the conversation, which you kind of can't do when you're
Yeah, I
talking
mean,
about
human
humans.
creativity is multiple pillars.
Yeah,
It's not just like STEM, right? So
right.
if you take away philosophy, you take away spirituality, you take away the heart and the soul,
Mm,
and you just say, "Oh, this AI can replace all these human being creators." I was talking to a tech bro and said, "Oh, it can replace actors, it can replace
mhm.
musicians, it can play artists." All it does is just create collages
Yeah,
of everything that it learned, and then it looks like it created something interesting, but
yeah,
there's no heart or soul or spirituality coming from that. And if you think that
yeah.
that all the art in the future should be 99% should be generated by that,
Mm,
humanity's gonna have a big problem because I believe art is really one of the prime movers why I get up every day.
yeah,
Right? It's not just for the paycheck.
yep.
It's for art, whatever that form is. All the arts are what drives me when I read a book, or I see somebody's painting, I see somebody as an
Mhm.
actor. That to me is more impressive than your token.
Yeah. It's a way to express your humanity. Yeah, I mean, I think of it like, for people who really enjoy, live performance, seeing actors on the stage. I mean, imagine if they were just robots kind of, following the plot line and saying things. It's like you're not gonna have those experiences that are created by, really seeing live theater. Just like you same as musicians up there who are programmed, like you need the human soul. And that, that does come down to what we could scientifically say are our biofields, our energy centers, all of the things that we can look to, centuries of understanding from different lenses, like we talked about Chinese medicine or
Yeah,
Ayurvedic
it's all
or
those
the
biofields, like,
Japanese
interact.
perspective. Right, right.
And if you have an office full of creators, whether they're engineers or physicists or whatever they are, English majors,
Mhm.
and they get together, that all those biofields kind of come in into contact, and they
Absolutely.
they create something that would have never been there.
Yep.
You say, I don't need any of those people. It's all going to be the CPU. I just don't. I understand why they want it because it makes them a profit center.
Yeah. Well, it's only gonna make them profit if people decide to take it in and give it any due respect. And I think that, while there's some entertainment value to some of these short skits that are humorous that they're AI producing and that kind of stuff, their bottom line is, do you really just want to be a human that's just consuming AI content? That doesn't seem,
Doesn't seem
you know,
satisfying if I go off
right.
Broadway and they see a play, an
Yeah.
original play, and I go
Hmm.
watch that play every night. The actor does their lines differently. I actually would enjoy
Yeah.
actually. I've done that where I've gone and seen the same play
Yeah.
2, 3 nights in a row to see how the actor actually did it differently
Hmm. But energy is different with the different people in the crowd. It's a whole different experience.
versus, like, somebody wants to just replicate that and make it the same every night.
Yeah.
What's the value of that?
Yeah. Absolutely.
But,
I
it's
hear
just
you.
interesting that people get in loops, right? You say they get, like,
Mhm.
we call it, like, a music, like a bad loop.
Right.
We get these bad sample loops. It's like, well, that's very repetitive. It's well, that's obvious, right? So we like, well, that might get you a lot of money, right? But it's so been overdone. It's so
Mm,
overused. It becomes like actually a kind of negative. It becomes in a creative minds person. They look at it like that's kind of toxic because
yeah.
that's kind of spreading, and then nobody is doing anything but that loop.
Mhm.
And so does that become like its own problem that people just take these loops and they just repeat them and they're contagious?
Yeah, in a way, I guess you could say that, and I do think there are a lot of social contagions in that way, that, where people, pick up, you know, belief systems, ideologies, perspectives, all different kinds of things, and they're carrying it at that surface level of how they show up or how they interact, but it's not really sometimes I think a lot of issues arise because people are living a life that's not reflective of their authentic self. And that's where, again, you come into repeated patterns that aren't serving you or people having trouble finding their way in life because they're not really living from their authentic self. They're living from what the expectations of their tribe are, or the expectations of society at large, or what they thought those expectations were. And I do think, to your point about, this idea of the neurodivergent, breaking the molds, I think for all of those of us who see the world a little bit differently, experience it differently, we're um, we just have to keep going to our own path because that is ultimately what all of humanity is going to be asked to do. And there's some of us that just don't have a choice
Yeah,
because
because
we're
we're
not
just
fitting into the other
we don't
buckets.
fit
So
into it. Yeah, like my
we just
daughter's an artist, my wife's an artist, and we
mm,
kinda gravitated to each other. So
yeah.
we're in that mindset where like we just don't talk about the weather or the sports, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Good.
there's some folks that they can't handle us because like we don't just do that. So we
Yeah.
kinda know our tribe is like, "Okay, well, they can't go there." So, like,
Yeah.
I said, "I know you can't go there, so I won't go there with you." But
Right.
it's just so it's interesting when you just feel like I have to actually be myself.
Yeah.
And, like I say, like, society kinda trains you. Once you get out of college, you could even go to grad school, and you start getting trained to be that widget.
Mhm.
Even
Yeah.
if you're a high level widget, you still get trained to
You're
be the
still
widget.
you're still a widget, yeah. It's true, and, I went through, I worked corporate, I worked in Silicon Valley. Then I decided I really that was not soul fulfilling at all. So I wanted to go back to graduate school. And that's when I did training in counseling psychology and then ultimately a doctorate in clinical psychology. And then even from that, I was at a stage in my life where, I had just met my husband. I was in my late 30s and it was like, okay, if we're going to have a family, then that has to be on the table now because of, just the timing of nature. And
Mhm.
so, I chucked all that to the side and made the choice that it was most important. If I learned all this about attachment and how important it is to be present for my child, and I know not everybody gets this choice, I felt really, really lucky to be able to make the choice that I was going to stay home with my child. I was like,
Mm.
I wanted
Yeah,
to
it's
have a
hard to
child
do. Hard to
at
do today.
it is hard. I had her at 40 and it was like, this is the most important thing now. I did all these things and yes, they were, important to me at the time, but now this is the most important thing. So, now she's 12 and it's like now I'm getting back to more and more work in the world and seeing clients and it's exciting to go back to that. But it's like, you know, I I don't wanna go and just do the licensed psychologist route because I don't wanna fit into I
You
don't
wanna
the
be in
way
that
I
box.
see it,
Yeah, you
yeah,
gotta
I'm not
you evolve beyond the box.
I have yeah, exactly. Once you evolve beyond it, you don't wanna go back and put yourself in a box, just for, a financial reason or a status reason or anything. It's like, I wanna do the work the way the work has
Your
evolved in
vision
my
and your
own life.
passion. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's like the new secret sauce. They always say
yeah,
everybody has a passion.
yeah.
Everybody has their own vision. A lot of times they're scared to execute on it because they don't know if they'll be successful. But the
Mhm,
more you can lean into your like what I try to explain to people, like when I'm working with a young musician, and they show me a demo, and it's trying to be like whatever's in the top 10. They're trying to be Taylor Swift. Like, I just don't there Taylor Swift already exists,
right.
right? Why don't you show me the song you're scared to show me?
Mhm.
Show me what we can do that nobody else can do because it's you.
That's right.
That's a hard thing to do because society kinda tells you, "Oh, you should be this person. You should be whoever's in the top 10, who's ever in the top of the algorithm." Everybody's trying to
Yeah,
copy, paste, and it's hard to be original because there's no real like, you might fail, and in tech, we call it failing upward. We fail a lot,
yeah. That's the
but
best thing to do is just
that's
try
what you
and
have to
fail.
do.
Yeah, I think that's so true, and it does take a lot of courage, and the more we can model for the generations that are coming up behind us that that's all we can do. That's really all we can do is be us. Like, don't there's no reason to have idol worship and or to try to be anybody else because that's just a waste of your life force, and I have to say, like, it's also just when I started to think about, "Oh gosh, okay, I'm gonna have to be on social media," this is just like from going from like I was just doing the mom thing. I was not on Facebook. I was not on just it's
All
still
the
just
social
as
media. Yeah,
I
it's
yeah,
its own thing.
it's its
It's
own
just
thing,
yeah.
and it does not come naturally to me. I don't particularly like it. Some people, it's just such a part of their way of being that they don't even think about it, but in doing that, the first time I looked at, like at the time, it was Twitter, um, but I was just like, "Okay, well, who how does this work and who's on?" And I just remember being so blown away that the like, millions of people around the world were following at the time. It was, Justin Bieber, and it was, all these and I was like it was so strange to me that
Right.
people would,
People just follow, like, watch
right?
all the cat videos. Like, there's, like, all these trends,
Strange.
like, the way my daughter's 25, so she'll show me the new trend, I'm like,
I
"Well, I'm
know.
58, so I don't get it." I like, the 20
Yeah.
the trend that the 25-year-olds look at, I'm like, I'm like, "I'm getting old. I don't even know what
I
that
know.
lingo is." Like, they
It's
have this
really
lingo, they have these acronyms, and I'm like and she's like,
yeah.
"Don't you get it? Isn't that fantastic?" I'm like,
Uh
"I don't know what you're talking about."
I know, it's like, "What?" Different languages, but also, what's interesting and it's gonna be really, compelling to see how humanity deals with this, but the research is fascinating. I mean, the research I was seeing the other day is like your cognitive capacity is so limited by even your phone being present. And they did a
Yeah,
study. It was
yeah,
like
somebody's
whether it was on the phone or like away, maybe in a purse or in the other room, and your your highest best self from a cognitive standpoint when the phone is in the other room, away, away, away from you. And then, the data on kids and technology is just so clear. We have really done a disservice. This generation Z is the first generation that's testing less
Really fast.
intelligent than the
Yeah, because
generation
they like,
before.
not that rote memory or something, but, like,
It was the
you know,
technology. They're
people
not.
don't know their Social Security number. Like, we used to know our driver's license number. We knew, like, I had
Phone
to some guy
numbers.
that said the kid didn't even know his address because he depends on his
Oh
phone,
my gosh.
right?
Yeah.
So, I don't need to know that, I'll just look at my phone. So, the problem is, like,
Yeah.
we grew up having to remember, algorithms for
Sure.
calculus and algebra and having to memorize stuff,
Yeah.
and, like, going to the library and doing the Dewey Decimal System and actually finding that information to do that paper,
Mhm.
and I really think it's a shame if you don't teach a kid how to actually go and
Yeah.
get the physical book
Yep.
and go and figure out how to get the information out of the book and do the endnotes manually.
Yeah.
I think you lose a lot of what, news reporters, people who write
Mhm.
books, that research capability is getting lost
Yeah, it
because of
is.
the tech, and
And
I think it's a
yeah.
disservice to the kids.
It is, and it's dangerous because now there's a body of information, and if it's not well sourced, you're not getting,
Yeah, you're
good
getting
information.
hallucinations, like, the
Yeah,
tech about it
exactly.
is the tech, the AI tech is so convincing because
Mm.
unlike a Google search, the old
Yeah.
Google search, like, the answer it gives you is very convincing,
Oh, yeah.
and even the footnotes might look like it actually looks right, but
Oh,
you
yeah.
have to trust and verify,
Well, it
right?
goes back
First,
to what we
you
were
have to check
saying.
it.
There's 2 sides, right? I've played with AI and I've said on controversial subjects, I'll say, I'll have done my own research. So then I will prompt it by saying, well, so and so, this is the research study, and they put forth this, and so, and I will coach it that I know these things, and then I'll say, so tell me, and then it will come from my perspective as someone who knows those things, and it will lay out even more information. Whereas if I come the other way and I, take the other side or I act as if I don't know, it has a completely different answer.
Yeah,
So
it's
it's
just
like
wildly different, and you can
it
go after it,
yeah,
like, and ask it something, then 10 minutes later, ask the same thing.
yeah,
In the libraries, the way they're learning, they gives you different responses,
yeah. It's scary.
and that's
It's,
scary because if you're an engineer, like, and you're looking for exact level stuff,
right?
like, if you're looking at code and it tells you that X is Y and Z is A, and
Yeah,
then it goes in the next thing, it tells you something totally different, then, like, your
yeah,
code can be very inconsistent, and you can get problems like what we've been in the papers, like,
yeah,
"Oh, that vibe code just blew up the system,"
yeah.
because it's not good. It
It's
actually
not.
doesn't
Yeah,
know enough about what we call the 10%, 20% scenario.
yeah,
Maybe it can handle the 80, 60, maybe it can do it, but it can't do what we call the unhappy path,
yeah.
and that's
We
where the
still need
human
humans.
beings come into place, that we
That's
handle
right.
the unhappy path, and if you guys think you can get rid of us and have the machine do it, you'll find out. But I think, yeah,
Yeah,
it's just humanity still like, we're the best machine that ever existed,
yes,
way beyond anything any machine was ever created, and these I understand why they wanna sell it.
yeah,
It's I heard somebody one typo say, "They've trained it on all human knowledge."
mm,
How could you have done that?
yeah,
What kind of statement is that?
yeah, an arrogant one.
But you're like, it's like that is very dangerous if you're making policy based on somebody saying all human knowledge.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
really?
Yeah, I mean, just looking at history is a perfect example. Different perspectives of information, and you could get a completely different narrative.
How
And
many
so,
nations are there on Earth? How many languages are? How many points of view? How many
mhm,
philosophical mindsets?
yeah,
I was in Japan and, because of the language, they'd write a paper, tech paper, and we'd write a paper in English.
mhm,
The sizes were totally different because the language aspects, because Japanese
right,
language
the
is using, like,
characters.
symbols that
Mhm,
mean a lot, so they
mhm,
don't have to say it. We
yeah,
have to spell it out. So
mm,
their document was a lot shorter, but it meant a lot, and we didn't know how to read those symbols the way they
Right.
do.
Right.
There was total
The
disconnect
nuance.
of
Yeah.
understanding, and it's like, well, their understanding is not incorrect, and our understanding is not incorrect. It's a different point of view.
Yeah. Yeah. And different ways of expressing it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
how are you supposed to relate that?
Exactly. And again, talking about Japan just makes me think about, um, going back to our discussion about energy. When I was in graduate school, one of the really interesting things about the program I was in is that we had to take Aikido for a couple of years. And so we had to really, and it's really smart if you're going to sit in a therapeutic container to know how to step off the line energetically so that you're not taking in everything that people are, getting out. Um, and it was just so impactful to me that, I got my daughter involved with Aikido at a young age, and it's been a really, beautiful experience for her to just, kinda grow up with that experience of the energetics of that kind of, if people don't know, it's a nonviolent martial art,
Yeah.
but it's very powerfully energy oriented, and,
Mhm.
what you were saying just made me realize there's a lot of information held in the energy exchange.
Yeah.
That
It's not
that
verbal, like, if you think
that's
about
not
film directors,
verbal.
I was talking to
Yeah.
film directors, and
Mhm.
film directors have all these nonverbal things they do with the actors, like the
Yeah.
screenplay writers and then the actors, like, they read the screenplay. The actor interprets that screenplay, and they do a lot of nonverbal, use their body, use their
Mhm.
eyes, use their lips, use the way they turn their head. So much of it's nonverbal,
Yeah.
and some of it's
Absolutely.
directed by what the writer wrote, but a lot of it is the interpretation of what the actor and what the director say, "Well, you know what? We need to feel it this way."
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
that is so much of what the art is.
that's right. That's right. And in talking about that capacity that as we show up as humans, everything that we do has a, sort of 3D, like, oh, they tilted their head or they did this or whatever, but then it has the other dimension and that where that information exchange is happening. So, we look at this idea of technology and we're talking about therapy, and a lot of people are using AI as a therapist, or they're using even just, therapy online. Well, you are missing something really important about the therapeutic container for specifically for talk therapy where you're really being held to share a large body of
Mhm.
information. There's an exchange that happens.
The energy.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah, and I think a lot of things like I do a lot of, a lot of the work I do is virtual, but it's, because it's more neural reprogramming, I'm not holding a huge container for a big traumatic experience to be discussed over an hour. Like, that is classic talk therapy, which I think should be in an office where you're
Yeah.
having the
Yeah, 'cause you
full
need that human
exchange.
interaction. I mean, it's
Yeah,
like
absolutely.
musicians will say, "I don't wanna virtually do a recording session with you
Yeah,
in Italy and me in France and this other guy in London. We
right.
actually both all have to
You
come
all
into
need to
the
be
studio in there because
yeah,
it's really important to pick up the vibe of what the drummer's doing.
yep.
Like,
The
look at what
energy in
the
the room.
yeah, everybody's looking at each other, and there's a
Yeah,
lot of nonverbal cues in music. Like,
absolutely.
all the musicians, we look at each other. You probably see it, us saying when musicians are playing, we're all
Yeah,
looking at each other,
yeah,
and we're not saying anything, but we're picking up cues.
yeah, absolutely. Then the one person who hits flow first, and then everybody vibes off that, they find their own flow, and there's a whole
There's a lot of cues that are going on,
yeah,
and it's
absolutely.
all how we yeah, they really it's like the energy work that's happening, and,
Mhm.
every night it's like, well, like, what the drummer's kicking off is like, he does that, and I know what to do on my keyboard, and the bass player
Yeah,
knows what to do, and the sax player knows what everybody knows what to do from the vibe that's
mhm.
happening, and they kinda just intuitively because they've done 10,000, 20,000 hours, right?
Yeah,
And they know when they hear something, what's gonna work, right?
mhm.
And they know what's in their soul, and they know what's in their
Yeah,
heart, they know what they feel at that moment,
yep,
and that is like, it's like the paintbrush on the canvas. It's like once you let that go, it is what it is,
yeah.
and you
Yeah,
have
it's
to
a
accept
beautiful process.
it.
Yeah, and also, each one of those that energy exchange, the unwritten or unsaid, aspects, everyone's being given permission to show up and come from their own heart and soul, and it's hard to get the access for that permission in a group setting like that, with, as musicians, I'm sure this is true when you're all in different places, you're not
Yeah, it's very
feeling the
difficult.
room.
during
Yeah.
COVID, we had a lot of hard time, a big hard
Yeah.
like, if you were the guy that could write everything and do everything yourself, you did really well. If
Mhm.
if you're like a Prince and you could play the drums, you could play everything, you could put the guys who were like, singer, songwriter, producer, writer, performer,
Yeah.
they cleaned up.
Yeah.
Bands that needed to be together that were locked out, they had a real hard time
Yeah.
because they could not figure out, and they tried, but a lot of times it didn't work.
Yeah.
So, it's
Very
like
true.
that shows you how important human connection is
Mhm.
to a lot of things, and, there are folks that wanna say, "Well, we can all live virtually," and I understand, if my daughter's, disabled, so
Yeah.
she has to use the virtual because it's an advantage for her.
Mhm.
And so she uses it to the nth degree of what she can do, and
Yeah.
she appreciates the capability, but I
Yeah.
understand the limitations of it.
Right. They're both benefits and downsides, and like you say, we can get a lot out of it, and then there are times where we do need to face that, in person is such is so much better. Yeah.
Yeah, so I think it's so interesting what you're doing. Like, where can listeners experience like your work? Do you have other than your? We do have your QR code up there. That
Mhm.
actually is more of like your invite to your website. Maybe you can talk about what that invite is.
Sure. Yeah. People can go to my website, drrochellevogt.com, and or if they go to the link there for the invite, they'll be able to schedule a 45-minute free consultation. And it's really just to understand, what's showing up and how we can move forward. Because ultimately, we're trying to come at things like we're not broken, life's not a problem. We're really trying to figure out how do we create the life we love, because that is why we're here. Going back to what I said in the beginning, right? It's just about showing up, being who we are, finding that authentic self. And so, that initial invitation is to connect with people, see if this is the right work for them, to use the techniques, the MAP method, the magnetic mind coaching approach, which is also based on process healing, uses the recode. And that body works, wonderful to integrate with doing the neural reprogramming, because you are really focused on creating a life that you love. And, that's kind of the next step if people are interested in the work. And if they go to my website, drrochellevogt.com/gift, GIFT,
Mhm.
they can also download a guide on 3 conscious breathing techniques that
Mm.
help to tell your nervous system you're safe. And just the way we're bombarded with so much information and the tech world and our digital lives, sometimes our nervous system can kind of get dysregulated. So it's important to have some tools at your disposal that really can help you um, communicate using your body and your breath to the nervous system that everything is okay. So that's another way to get some resources.
Wow. I want to thank you for being here on the Family Electric Ghost podcast. Again, people can take the QR code and scan that with your phone. You can go right to the website. And I want to thank
Thank
you for
you.
taking the time to talk to our audience today. Thank you very
Oh,
much.
absolutely. Thank you. It was my pleasure. Such a wonderful conversation. I enjoyed it.